Mr. Burlison, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Baker, you didn't mention my district, so I'll say Southwest Missouri, there are 315 miles of track that's owned or operated by short line and regional rail. And you emphasized in your testimony that these are small businesses. I mean, it's thrown out as big corporations, but no, these are small businesses. And I think small businesses are the backbone of the American economy, and vital to every state, including the state of Missouri. That being said, what if you had to rank in order the most egregious, the most burdensome, and ridiculous regulations that your industry faces? What are the top three?
Well, first of all, I apologize for not mentioning your district. I would have loved to, but I've found Congress is very strict about the 5-minute.
Hey, you're welcome to come to Southwest Missouri. It's beautiful.
I will happily accept that invitation. I would love to join. Maybe combine it with a visit to the chairman's district also.
Sounds good.
The most egregious. I will say on one, which is really more kind of red tape than a regulation, but on the Christie grants, when they come, there are recipients of the grants who just ask for permission to use pre-award authority. That is basically to spend their own money at risk before the grant gets finalized, just so they can get things going, buy materials, for instance, hire engineers, hire contractors, start the work, and it is very difficult to even get authority for pre-award approval from the FRA. For the life of me, I cannot figure out why that is anything other than an easy yes, almost instantaneously. That's one. Dispatcher certifications, dispatcher and signalman certifications is a new rule that is coming that I believe is a textbook example of solving a problem that just doesn't exist. There's no data, no reason to believe that we had dispatchers or signalmen who are untrained or undertrained or causing accidents because of a lack of training. We find the certifications to be...
I mean, at the end of the day, you're employing these individuals, and if they're not doing a good job or they're not safe, then they're not going to have that job. Right?
That's right, and there's perfect alignment of incentives. It's not like there's some world where we wouldn't want our own employees to be trained to do the job.
Anybody that understands licensure laws and certification laws understands it's all about reducing the number of people that are eligible to work, right? And so you can drive up labor costs. This is what happens in the healthcare system. Every work labor-related industry that wants to impose government certification requirements is just about reducing the labor pool.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, I believe Mr. Jeffries, in your testimony, you highlighted the importance of Congress to oppose policies that harm the railroad's ability to operate safely and efficiently, such as requiring a 2-person crew in freight locomotive cabs, which there's been zero quantitative evidence that a 2-person crew would mandate actually enhance safety. So could you highlight what is the impact and the effect in the industry that this 2-person rule has?
So as I mentioned at the outset, locking in current operating practice in perpetuity, in our view, is never a good idea in industries that continue to evolve, whether it's the rail industry or any other industry. And your point is spot on. There's absolutely no data to show that that regulation advances safety. In 2016, the Obama administration, in its preamble to the NPRM it put out, acknowledged it much. In 2019, when the Trump administration withdrew it, they acknowledged as much. 2020, on the campaign trail, President Biden made a campaign promise that he was going to put the rule back out. He did. Still a lack of data. Technology has only continued to advance. PTC has only continued to advance. Our view is that, look, train consist has always been a matter for collective bargaining between us and our employees. That's where it should be. There's no data to support another outcome, and we think locking in current operating practice is counterintuitive to the continued progress of the industry, especially when one of the core priorities identified by our employees is establishing more of a work-life balance. And when we can create a scenario when an employee works a scheduled shift, goes home to bed in their home every night, then we believe there's opportunities to continue to have that conversation with our unions to see if there are agreements that can be met in certain situations.
Thank you. My time has expired.
I recognize is Mr. Burlison from Missouri. Is that right? For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, thank you for the witnesses for coming and for whoever is watching. But what you're witnessing is the dying scream of addicts who realize that tomorrow they're going into recovery. Because this town, Congress, has been addicted on spending opium or other people's money for a long time. And that's what you're witnessing today, is this desperate cry of individuals who don't want to see fiscal responsibility. But we've gotten to this point, and it's a point of, we're getting close to where we're at a point of no return. And so a group called EPIC, which is the Economic Policy Innovation Center, said that we're nearing a fiscal cliff. We're nearing a point in which we're going to start going down a debt spiral. They say that will occur under current policies if we don't cut any spending in the next 15 years. It gets worse. 15 years seems like a long ways out, but you've got to slow this freight train of spending down to have any impact 15 years from now. In addition, the Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 8 years, right? And the Medicare has another ticking time bomb in just 10 short years. So look, the spending spree is over. We have got to return to some form of fiscal sanity or we won't have a country. This is not a Republican problem or a Democratic problem. This is a math problem, period. And so I would have expected Democratic colleagues to see that and recognize that this is a serious problem, and let's all get behind this and figure out a way to solve this problem. And the way to do that is to figure out the easy way to do that with the least harm is to figure out how to make government more efficient with the dollars that we're bringing in, right? And reduce that burden on the American people. As was said, we're at $36 trillion in debt. Our interest is over $1 trillion a year, which now eclipses all other spending. We're at 120% of debt to GDP. So it's absolutely unsustainable. We've never been at that level of debt. Actually, we're beyond the level of debt that we were just after World War II. And we had just finished fighting a world war. This puts us in a very critical situation where if we are faced with any kind of global conflict, we have no money, we have no room to go. So, and then when it was talked about some of the opportunities for waste and bringing in outside consultants to identify and expose some things, because this town is a little bit incestuous. I mean, they generally do not think outside of the box. This town is really good at doing one thing, and that is saying why something can't be done, right? So it's good to have people outside of the box come in like Mr. Musk. And I want to ask Governor Reynolds, thank you for being here today. I understand in Iowa, you were Doge before Doge was cool, right? So in Iowa, you rely on outside expertise to come in, correct?
Yes, we did. Because otherwise, I mean, when you're in it, you see it one way and you get accustomed to what you're doing. And I think it's beneficial to have somebody from the outside come in and take a look at some of the practices and some of the initiatives and how we're operating. So it was actually beneficial. We hired a consultant to do the alignment to help really manage it, but to also help us compare how we were doing business with other states. And we're standing up Iowa Doge, and we're bringing this private sector in again for that very reason, so they can look at some of the processes and how government operates and give us recommendations on what we could do different.
Yeah, would you embrace if Elon Musk offered to you to come in with no pay, with a team of people with 200 level IQs
Yeah. We would-
all with no pay. Would you embrace that?
I would welcome that, especially when we look at the legacy systems and the antiquated systems that government is working under. To have somebody from the private sector, that risk their own capital on an idea to come in and take a look at how we can make government better, I think would be a huge benefit for the taxpayers of Iowa.
I think DOGE immediately, just in the hiring, probably raised the average IQ of federal workers, here. Let me ask last question of Mr. Schatz. I understand that the Citizens Against Government Waste publishes an annual report called Prime Cuts, which makes recommendations. Could you tell us about some of the latest versions of this report and what kind of savings taxpayers, might be able to find, what DOGE might be able to find?
We have a Prime Cuts comes out annually. We're working on the report for 2024, but 2023 is $5.1 trillion over 5 years. It addresses things I've discussed already, technology, telecommunications, broadband consolidation, sale of federal property, which saves $15 billion over 5 years. Some of them make perfect sense, and a lot of them are common sense, and that's something that I think is also in short supply in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you. My time has expired.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Presley from Massachusetts.
All right, I will now yield 5 minutes to Mr. Burlison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this hearing. I have to admit, whenever I saw the subject line of this, I was surprised that this was a thing. I'm shocked. I think the American people should be even more shocked to find and disgusted to find out what's happening with their dollars. I think it's actually embarrassing. I can't imagine people from other countries look at this country as a beacon and as an example, and here we are spending money, taxpayer dollars, to try to study transgender transing animals and testing them on party drugs. I mean, it's insane. My question to you, Mr. Goodman, is I understand that your organization, White Coat Waste, helped expose the taxpayer-funded experiments on bats that led to the COVID pandemic. So can you walk us through how did you come about that? What was your investigation? How did you get the information?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Again, it's an honor to be here. In 2018, we uncovered a lab at the USDA here right outside of the Beltway where they were breeding hundreds of kittens every year and then flying to China and other foreign countries to these disgusting wet markets and buying dog and cat meat. They were then putting it in their federal employees. They were then putting it in their carry-on luggage, flying it back to the United States, and then force-feeding dog and cat meat to kittens in this government laboratory in Maryland. They had spent $22 million on this project.
For what purpose?
They wanted to know if people eating dog and cat meat in China might be exposed to a particular parasite that could be carried in dog and cat meat.
Wow.
So that was when we first got a sense that taxpayer
That was
dollars.
that was the first clue.
Yeah,
And you
so-
continue to follow that.
And fortunately, the Trump administration shut that project down. They adopted out the cats who were left in the lab. 2 of them went to live with my boss, the president and founder of White Coat Waste Project, Delilah and Petit. Lived happily ever after with him. But that set us on the scent of foreign aid for animal research. In late 2019, we discovered a list on the NIH website of all the labs in China receiving taxpayer dollars. And in January of 2020, we went.
There's like still 26?
Yeah.
Or how many were there at that?
There were more than 30 at the time, and there were actually labs in Russia receiving taxpayer money at the time. In January of 2020, we met with the White House to flag for them that these labs in China, including the Wuhan lab, were receiving taxpayer funding. And then in April 2020, we finally went public, working with Congressman Matt Gaetz and Joni Ernst. We went public, exposing the grant that Fauci sent to the Wuhan lab through EcoHealth Alliance to fund the gain-of-function experiments. And then since then, we've been working to defund EcoHealth, defund the Wuhan lab, and cut funding for all animal laboratories in adversarial nations as a matter of animal welfare, government waste, and national security.
What kind of sick and twisted individual comes up with a plan to have an experiment where you're going to, feed turn these animals into cannibals and see what the outcome is? Where does that come from? Like, what was the thought process? How did the PhD student who's doing the research, how did they make that pitch to get that grant?
If it tells you anything about the government's thinking, the person responsible for this experiment is in the USDA's Hall of Fame,
The name?
Dr. Doobie.
Dr. Doobie, wow. Let me ask this question. I just have a little bit more time left. Given the fact that we have got quantum computing, we have now AI, isn't there opportunities where we can, if they truly are trying to do research and determine something, couldn't they run some of these, a lot of this research through, advanced technology using quantum computers, data centers?
Absolutely, and there's studies that have come out of Johns Hopkins and elsewhere showing that things like screening drugs and chemicals for human safety are actually much more accurate and efficient using computer modeling and AI than testing on lab maps.
On a completely different species.
Correct.
Right? With completely different DNA. It would make sense. Thank you. I appreciate what you do. Thank you for exposing all of this. It's shameful that we're still sending money to these, but we will do everything. I will do everything we can to try to stop this.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burlison. With agreement from the ranking member, the chair and ranking member will each get an additional 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak frankly at first to the American people. We're nearing $37 trillion in national debt. What does that mean? That means that each and every U.S. taxpayer owes over $323,000. Okay? What does that mean? That means when the EPIC, which is the Economic Policy Innovation Center, says we have 18 trillion left. That's it. 18 trillion left to take out, and we're spending $2 trillion in debt every year. Folks, we're at the precipice of a debt, like a debt cycle. We are literally at a point in which the dollar will be worth nothing. What does that mean? And we know Social Security goes bankrupt in 8 years, right? Medicare goes bankrupt in 10 years. And then 15 years from now, the dollar is completely devalued and worth nothing. So what does that mean? That means your pension, the money in your bank, your savings is nothing. It's worthless. So what are we doing? We're trying to save this country. We're trying to save your pensions. We're trying to save your bank accounts. We're trying to save this country for the next generation, and it would be nice if we had help. But instead, we have people that are fighting us on this. And I think that I would hate to be in the Democratic Party right now because you're in a really bad bind. You're having to defend all of this crazy spending, all of this crazy waste. So how do you do it? You do ad hominem attacks. You attack the messenger. Oh, Elon Musk, right? He's rich. He must be evil, right? That's the attacks. Really? You can't do any better than that, right? Let's talk on the policy. Help us. We're trying to save this country. This is and Elon Musk, who's making no money doing this, is trying to save this country. Why? Because he has invested in the United States of America more than anybody, right? So I think that we should embrace it. In fact, not a single company, governor of any state would ever turn down Elon Musk and his team of Doge from coming in and providing free services to right the course and financially in any state or organization. It's ridiculous that we would demonize someone that loves this country so much. Mr. Whitman, the formation of agencies via the executive action is not new, right? The formation of Doge is not new. Can you, are you familiar with any other previous presidencies where they've formed organizations like Doge via executive action?
Yeah, so actually the agency that Doge is occupying is one that was created in a previous administration. So it is something that happens routinely. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, there's been the Office of Budget Management was created, Environmental Protection Agency was created, the U.S. Digital Service, which is now Doge, was created all by executive order, right?
And actually one other I'd add is USAID was originally created through an executive order by President Kennedy and then later formalized.
And then, Madam Chair, I have a video I would like to end with that just, let's review, if we could cue that, to remind, and I want to remind my Democratic friends, at a point in which you once had the majority of the American people on your side, this is what your party believed in.
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I've read it, and where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely appropriate for our governments and our agencies to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress and legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign to cut waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not acting. There you go.
I think it speaks for itself. My time has expired.
Mr. Burlison for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and good morning to our witnesses. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between real charity and fake charity or phony charity. Real charity is an individual seeing a need, feeling the love in their heart, the compassion for their fellow man, digging money out of their own pocket and giving it to the people in need. Government charity, fake charity, is taking from somebody else and giving it to whoever you think that you want to give it to. Let's call this USAID program for what it actually is. It is a disgraceful betrayal of the American taxpayer. It's all under the guise of being charity, but for years, the Democrats have turned USAID into their personal slush fund, funneling billions of our hard-earned tax dollars into a cesspool of left-wing propaganda, all masquerading under the guise of charitable aid. And what did we get for it? Not stronger allies, not safer borders, and hardly a dime's worth for the American interest. No, we got absurdity for it. Taxpayer cash bankrolling climate activism, DEI, that are frequently at odds with the values and the needs of the countries that we're supposedly aiding. This isn't aid. It's a shakedown of our taxpayers, courtesy of the left-wing bureaucracy working with dark money networks that Mr. O'Neill described so eloquently earlier. Now, I have a question for Mr. Roman. As DOGE has recently brought to the forefront, USAID has often used American tax dollars to push leftist ideology abroad. One of these areas is exporting radical renewable energy agenda, which I believe is not only not in the best interest of the U.S., but it's also detrimental to the very countries that the aid is supposed to be helping, subsidized by anti-competitive energy policy. Can you touch on the impact that this policy has?
Without being a meteorologist or climatologist or a geologist, I can't necessarily speak about energy, but I can speak more largely about the sponsorship of agendas which are anathema to American interests abroad. Specifically in the report that we published about 3 weeks ago, we were finding that there were special interests who would come to USAID contract officers, they would make recommendations, and it was basically the granting like a political commissar in the Soviet Union would do to his favorite unit, rather than looking at what was actually good for the United States.
Thank you. Mr. Pimarack, it was once quoted by Samantha Power. She declared that USAID is a climate agency. And so DOGE recently canceled 10 climate and clean energy programs, including a nearly $85 million award aimed at increasing clean energy in Africa. Also, a $18.7 million program for electric vehicles to be adopted in Nepal. My question to you is USAID a climate agency?
They wasted a lot of money on it. I can't think of any other agenda that has caused as much poverty and hunger as the climate agenda. For example, the higher energy costs hits the poor the hardest. For poor farmers in Africa that have to rely on natural gas-based fertilizers, it became too expensive, so crop yields just plummeted. And these countries at the same time were prevented from developing their own fossil fuel industries in which they could generate the income to finance their own social services.
Thank you. And my last question has to do with the promotion of values outside of, outside of the values of the United States and Western culture. As a member of Congress, I've had diplomats from other countries come meet with me in my office and beg us to stop using the aid that we're sending to their country as a leverage point to force them into doing things that their countries find abhorrent. One of those is the promotion of abortion. USAID is being used to push ideologies, including abortion ideology, across the globe. In fact, during the Biden administration, one of his first actions was to sign a memorandum reinstituting the foreign aid to abortion programs. But Mr. O'Neill, that jeopardized the same funding that was supposed to be helping people with AIDS.
Yeah, we've seen throughout the Biden administration the impact of these far-left organizations propped up by the left's dark money network, pushing a host of causes, particularly on abortion. I have a big chapter talking about the prosecution of pro-life protesters.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Burlison for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Mace, for having this important hearing. You know, it's really good to see that the disaster that was Alejandro Mayorkas is gone. He's a disgrace. I'm glad he was impeached, and he will forever have a stain on the history of the United States and the scourge that he allowed to ensue. But he lied to us multiple times. He stood before members of Congress and he said the border is secure. Well, I ask you, Mr. Fabricatore, Dr. Gilmer, was that true?
It was absolutely not true. The border was not secure.
It was not secure, and it was made less secure.
Okay. Then he went on to NPR, okay, and he had an interview just this year in which he said that the border, the border is now more secure under the end of the Biden administration than it was in 2019. Is that true?
No, it's not true. The border is more secure with this administration that's in place.
I echo my colleague.
Okay. Then my other question is that he also said that to truly secure the border, that they were doing the most that they possibly could do as an executive branch, that Congress had to act. Now we've heard that again and again, but the data and the facts dispute otherwise, right? So, is it the only difference, or is Congress the only one that can make a difference? Or can the president actually make a difference?
The president can absolutely make a difference. It's about attitude and effort. This president, President Trump, is putting in the attitude that's needed to say the border should be secure, and he's putting in the effort. It's something that the last administration did not do. They didn't have that attitude. They wanted people to come in, and they did not put in the effort.
Again, I echo my colleague. We have laws on the books. We have Title VIII, which is our immigration law. It's the huge volume that my colleague and I had to virtually memorize earlier in our careers. While maybe it hasn't kept up with the current state of time,
it's still pretty clear.
It's still pretty clear,
and it's still illegal.
It's still, yes. And it's actually not a bad piece of legislation. It just hasn't kept up with the times. And if we were allowed to enforce those laws in the way that, in the manner and spirit in which those laws were written, we'd be much more effective.
Let me ask this: was the CBP One app effective, or was Was it a disaster?
It was a disaster in the way that they used it. The CBP-1 app was not meant to be used for what it was used for under the Biden administration. It was supposed to be used for bringing in goods and traffic and other things. The way that they used it, I believe, was an end run around Congress.
Okay. Is there any technology that you would advocate for that would help, ICE do its job?
There's a lot of technology that's out there, and I think it's important that we bring this technology forward and we allow ICE agents to actually use some of it to see what's the best that we would need. When we're looking at the CBP-1 app and how it was used, there may be technology within that we could have used. It's just how the application was actually used and what it was used for.
I know that with the advent of AI, it may open up some opportunities to dig deeper into people's backgrounds and their histories.
Yeah, AI is going to definitely be groundbreaking for us, but we're always going to need that human element because getting human intelligence out of someone else right now is not easily done just with AI. You still need that case agent to be able to look in the eyes of the person that's sitting in front of them to develop that human intel.
I agree. Humans are never, or technology is never going to fully replace humans, but there is technology out there today that we need to learn to use better. As a matter of coincidence, right now in Washington, D.C., about 5 blocks from here, there are probably about 150 of the most tech-savvy, innovative tech providers, solution providers, developers that are meeting privately to address these very issues that we're talking about right now. And that is where a lot of these solutions are going to come from, the minds of private industry who can help guide the federal government in a safe, secure use of technology.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service to our country. I'm sorry that your administration let you down and let other ICE agents down. And with that, I yield.
Thank you. I will now recognize.
Chair recognizes Mr. Burlison from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I gathered from this hearing, the term sanctuary cities seems to mean a sanctuary only for criminals. Throughout this hearing, we have heard countless examples of illegal immigrants with criminal histories being allowed to roam free in these cities and continue to commit crimes and violence against American citizens that should never have happened. The bottom line is that sanctuary policies are a violation of federal immigration laws. The states, when they enacted the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, made it very clear that it's in the purview of the federal government, not the states, to determine these policies. States shouldn't be flaunting our laws that they gave us the sole responsibility to implement. And yet Chicago, Denver, New York City, and Boston are aiding and abetting in the furtherance of laws and policies that are in direct defiance of the immigration laws that are passed by Congress. This hearing is important for us as Congress to determine ways in which we can use our constitutional powers, such as the power of the purse, to force these and other sanctuary cities into compliance. My first question, I want to ask Mr. Byer. You haven't had a lot of questions today, right?
Not enough.
I want to ask, okay, so are you aware of how much it costs the American taxpayer per illegal immigrant in the United States, roughly?
Not on a per capita basis, no.
Okay. The Budget Committee has determined it's almost about $9,000 in net loss per per illegal immigrant.
That's definitely not correct.
Okay, you can question, but that's the group that did the research. So let me ask you this. Does Cato support subsidizing, creating taxpayer programs to subsidize other people's health care benefits?
No, we don't.
Okay. Does Cato support using taxpayer dollars to support people staying in hotels?
Definitely not.
Okay, just wanted to get that cleared up because I was worried where Cato stood. Mr. Adams, you stated that the migrant crisis. Wait, first, I want to ask this question from everybody on the panel. Is there a difference between, if there's a difference between the ICE detainer and a criminal warrant, which one would you honor?
I'm sure I understand the question. You said there's a difference between an ICE detainer and a criminal warrant?
Yes.
We would always honor an ICE detainer that comes with a judicial warrant. That is what the law calls for in the city.
Okay, and do you concur? Is that what you would do?
We always support our criminal warrants with ICE requests, yes.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
With a criminal warrant, our local police department, with a criminal warrant, will collaborate and cooperate with federal agents.
And Mrs. Wu?
Whenever there's a criminal warrant from any agency, Boston Police enforce it.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, I'm concerned about what's happening, obviously, my neighboring state of Illinois. But you said that you're prepared, let's see, you said that you oppose proposals to eliminate sanctuary protections for illegal immigrants that are convicted of serious crimes. Why do you think it's important to protect even violent criminals?
We do not protect violent criminals. In fact, my top priority is to make sure that the people of Chicago are safe. Our local law enforcement work hard every single day to ensure that. That's why I invested in more detectives so that we can actually solve crime. And as a result of the work that I've done under my leadership, crime has gone down since I've been mayor.
Mrs. Wu, you've said multiple times, you made it very clear that you're a welcoming city, knowing that there is a cost to the taxpayer. What's the acceptable number? Is there any acceptable or reasonable limit that you would consider before your city is overrun?
We are a city that is the safest in the country because everyone feels connected to city services. Everyone can
So
call
there's
911.
you have no answer. There's no capacity. That's too much.
Congressman, respectfully, I'm the mayor of Boston. I don't get to decide who comes into our country and where they go after that. Our job is to keep people fed and healthy and safe when they arrive in our city. And we do that in order to make sure that everyone across our community is safe. Resources are strained, but I would ask you to please do your job and be part of passing bipartisan legislation that would allow us to do what
we passed H.R. 2, but what's been made very clear is that we don't need to pass laws. All we need is a new president. My time has expired.
Gentleman's time's expired. They've called for votes, but we have one last question.
Gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burlison, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that it's important to bring this conversation into the context that needs to be said, which is that we are $36 trillion in debt. As a nation, we're spending 20% of every dollar that comes in from taxpayers just to cover the interest. And guess what? American people, bad news, interest rates are going up. So that 20% is going to get worse and worse. We had Ray Dalio come in and tell Congress that we are entering potentially dark territory. There's a number of red flags. We're at the worst level of debt. We're at a worse level of debt than we were after we left the World War II, okay? We're at that level of debt, and we didn't just fight a war. We're facing potential wars and conflicts. We're at that level of debt, and we didn't just emerge from a recession or a depression. If that happens today, you'll see the dollar no longer be the world reserve currency, and we will be in serious trouble. And so that is the context that we're in. Look, if there was all the money in the world, it's fine to throw money around, but we don't have all the money in the world. And the question that we have at hand today is it appropriate to spend taxpayer dollars on things that may not be necessary anymore? And so my question, Mr. Gonzalez, at one point in time, there was state-sponsored speech directly. It was the form of town criers, correct? So government used to fund people to go out in the street and deliver the news of the day vocally at street corners, correct? Okay, why don't we do that today?
Well, I think it's because we have better ways of delivering the news.
I mean, I think you get my point. Like today, at one point in time, there was very limited access to news, and there was an appropriate time where potentially we needed to have state-sponsored news. But is that the way? Do we need that today?
No, we do not. And may I quote Thomas Jefferson on this very point, since you bring this up? He said, "To compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves and abhors is sinful and tyrannical. This is what I base my opposition to public funding for media.
Yeah, and that's why I think that given this context, like, let's be real. It was said that we're attacking free speech. This is state-sponsored speech, and the very reason why we have these witnesses before us today isn't because they're totally being funded or completely being funded. We're not bringing in Disney Channel in here, right? We're not bringing in the National Geographic, right, for their content. The reason why we're having this conversation is because we are funding you, and because we're funding you, the taxpayers get to have an opportunity to ask, why are we funding some of this content that they might disagree with? Right?
Yeah, no, that's completely right. In fact, I think that PBS and NPR, but especially PBS, will thrive on the membership model. They keep saying it's such a small percentage. Well, if it's the public funding, if it's such a small percentage, then no problem.
Yeah. So, Ms. Maurer, I'm going to ask a very difficult question, but if you're in my shoes and you have to face the fact, can we fund Social Security or do we spend money on NPR? Which would you choose?
Congressman, I would argue that in one
if you had to pick, if you were forced to make a decision, there wasn't enough money to go around, Social Security or NPR?
We know how important public media is to our nation's seniors, sir.
More important than Social Security. I think the American people disagree.
I think that
Ms. Kerger, let me ask this. Would it be more appropriate to fund PBS or to fund veterans' health care? If given limited resources, which is where we're at.
I recognize the limited resources, and I feel that both are important for this country.
And I think what the American people want to know is when they're sending money, their taxpayer dollars, and they're funding things like Independent Lens. And look, I like some of the content on your stations. I love Nova. But you know what? Nova competes with National Geographic and Nature. Why are we funding something that competes with these private sector industries? I like Sesame Street, but I also know that it's competing directly with Handy Manny, Doc McStuffins, and Little Einsteins, right? Those exist, and we're not funding them. They're not here having to defend their content. But because we are funding it, I'm going to ask you, why are we funding episodes of Real Lens, Independent Lens, about an episode called Real Boy, a trans teen navigates adolescent sobriety and physical emotional ramifications? That's what the American people want to know. Social Security.
We're out of time, but our witnesses can answer the questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was a documentary that was produced for adults as part of our primetime audience, and it was part of a point of view that we share to try to help people understand the wide breadth of experiences of people across the country.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Chilson, America has what some have described as a golden opportunity to lead in the next generation of AI, but many barriers still exist, as has been mentioned. What is really holding us back from reaching our full potential, such as securing investment in private capital?
So there are many challenges for this moonshot, and I want to endorse Mr. Mills' idea that it's private industry that's going to drive this ahead, and it's Congress's job to build the right launch pad for this moonshot. And so clearing the launch pad is the first thing. And I think especially in the energy space, permitting processes that slow down the ability to deploy and build new energy, not in a way that actually achieves, in many cases, the economic or the environmental benefits that we're seeking, but in a way that just drags things out unnecessarily slow and gives veto points to people who don't necessarily have environmental concerns in hand. But the other big challenge, I think, in this space is a transformation that we're seeing largely at the state level about how we consider software and how we regulate software. And so software traditionally has been regulated not directly, but indirectly in the uses in which it's put. So, for example, We have regulation on medical devices, which often incorporate software. We have regulation on transportation. Cars are rolling computers at this point. And so when we regulate at the use rather than at the general computation level or the general software development level, we get closer to the harm, we get closer to the goals of regulation, and we avoid really unintended consequences. And so states are rolling out these big picture regulatory schemes for software. I think that's a real challenge, and I think it's something that Congress needs to step in on.
Thank you. My other question has to do with the fact that there's been a lot of fear, a lot of concern or worry about what the potential outcomes might be. But to me, I see the potential for how our economy is going to pivot and grow, and the tremendous opportunities that we will receive. Why do you think Americans should be more excited about the prospects and the job opportunities that AI might bring than be fearful?
Well, I think why is artificial intelligence important? It's because intelligence is important, and the ability to deploy new powerful computation to some of the most challenging problems that we have as humans. The healthcare space is an amazing example of this. I just saw this morning there is a new paper in Nature that is giving a woman who has not been able to speak for years, she's fully paralyzed, it can scan her brain, and she can speak by thinking the words in her head. And she can speak at 90 words per minute, which is slightly slower than I'm speaking, but not that much, right? And that's really impressive. That is the type of medical benefit that's direct. Outside of that, the economic benefits from efficiency, my written testimony goes into them much more. Trillions of dollars of potential benefit in this space.
Thank you. Mr. Levy, how do we begin to implement, actually, let me ask this question. You described that we have different, that once we unlock this technology, that we have some real life examples of services that are stopping us from doing so. How do data centers support, or what kind of real world examples of regulations and things that are hindering you from your data centers from moving forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question, and I would tell you that we are seeing a lot of barriers that are holding us back from moving forward as quickly as we can to meet these demand signals. Clearly, energy permitting is one, and the asynchronous timelines around which data centers can be constructed and potentially operated, but then be energized is very much a challenge. We could put a data center facility from groundbreaking to commissioning 18 months to 2 years. In order to get energy projects online, we're looking at 5 years of permitting on average, up to 7 years for permitting alone for transmission infrastructure. We're also seeing some challenges, regulatory barriers when it comes to equipment, particularly electrical equipment.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I want to start, Mr. Zinger, during one of the previous witnesses' testimony, it was said that that the American manufacturing is standing on the shoulders of 3D printing that was developed by other governments in Japan. Would you say that that's accurate, that you're standing on the shoulders of that technology?
Specifically as to what we do, our printing machine is not based on any Japanese patents. It's solely based on U.S. inventions, a U.S. supply chain, and is built within our factories in the U.S.
Thank you. Many critics argue that manufacturing simply can't return to the U.S. because we have high labor costs. From your perspective, what is the strongest counter-argument to that?
Strongest counter-argument is that right now we have European car makers that we are in a relatively high-cost labor market, California, shipping to Aston Martin and other companies. So Aston Martin, Bugatti, McLaren, Mercedes, and Porsche, these are customers of an American company with American workers shipping today. I think that is because American innovation can create tools for American workers that allow them to do things faster, better, and cheaper. And when that happens, then you create a competitive manufacturing infrastructure, which we absolutely can have, and we absolutely can rebuild our global manufacturing market share. But it has to be based on new leapfrog technology that exists today commercially.
Can you give us an insight as to the issues regarding supply chain? For example, the resources that you need. You have some objects in front of you that are printed with a type of aluminum. I think that the last aluminum smelter was in Southeast Missouri. It's no longer there in the United States. Is there any concerns about the core materials in that supply chain?
I'd say we have a variety of materials that range from aluminum alloys we develop to high-temp materials for hypersonic applications to high-strength materials for munitions. From the very start, and the company was founded about a decade ago, we wanted to make sure that we had a secure supply chain. So we use U.S. allied suppliers. What I would say is these are metal powders. That atomization process, there is no reason that with different areas in the United States that have cheap, abundant energy, such as natural gas, that we couldn't bring back atomization production of metal powders and scale that as we build advanced manufacturing. And that is something we absolutely can do and should do.
Mr. Power, we have had previous hearings on the situation with our energy infrastructure, and can you expound on what a company is, what's going through their process when they're deciding where to locate a facility, and how much does electricity costs and availability play into that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Energy costs and regulations related to energy are a huge part of where we decide to put new factories in the United States. Firstly, just for speed of building, you would be probably surprised at how hard we could build a factory faster than we could get the permits to rig up electricity to it in certain states, which is a huge barrier to speed and pace, especially in the United States. And energy costs are such a huge part of our cost base that, compared to China, I think our energy cost is 10 to 20 times without subsidies. And the second point I'd make on energy costs is 95% of the cost of aluminum, as an example, is actually the cost of energy. So having energy too cheap to meet here in the United States is not just helpful for running factories and having energy grids that can scale with all these advanced factories, but also for the raw material costs and inputs that are being passed on to our customers. So I think it's incredibly important, and strength of the grid, clean power, and then the cheapness and scalability of that power really drive a lot of the decisions of where we put factories, where we put data centers, and any advanced facility going into the American states.
Thank you.
Mr. Burlison from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to our two witnesses for confronting the assault on women's sports. Men and women's sports is absolutely nonsense, no matter how you spin it. It's shameful to look at the women that have been hurt from these men and tell them that they need to be silent in the name of inclusion. This whole hearing, we've had motions to try to stop this hearing, to stop these young women from expressing their views. It's almost as if we have nothing to see here. We don't want to hear what you have to say. That's the message that's coming from this side. But I'm here because I want to hear what you have to say. And, look, whether it's fencing tournaments, track and field, my daughters are in soccer or volleyball games, you're endangering our daughters and belittling their narrative. The men like Mr. Liefeld who are wrecking women's sports, with woke poison and a twisted mental view of things are destroying and the opportunities for these young women. Meanwhile, Americans, they all get this. They look at this and they think that this is absolutely crazy, that we're even here. And so we're here to obliterate this insanity and fight for our girls and their safety and their fairness in their athletic endeavors. And I've got to tell you, Ms. Graves, I was shocked to read your testimony where you belittled the experience of Miss Turner. In your testimony, you said that that her experience is part of a larger scheme to attack young trans people. Do you really? You said it was deliberate spectacle that was carried out. Do you really believe she contrived this situation? That she put herself.
She testified that she planned the night before.
She cried the night before. Do you have any sympathy for a young woman who realizes she's going to have to sword fight a man the next day?
Protest is important. It is to make a point. There is mixed gender competition all the time in fencing. You heard that it was a plurality.
Ms. Graves, I'm taking my time. This young woman did not register for a mixed sport, for a mixed event. She registered to compete with other women. And that right was taken from her. And she, bravely stood her ground, and I think the world applauded you for that. Ms. McNabb, the life-changing, altering. Can you describe? And this is where I want to kind of give some time. This event has had a dramatic impact on your life, physically, the mental anguish that you've gone through. Unlike some, I want to hear your story. I want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Congressman. Yeah, what happened to me was 100% avoidable, and it completely changed my life. I never played volleyball again that day. That was the last day. And it's so sad because I had the hopes of playing collegiate sports in softball, and that day never came because I was just never the same. I've had to navigate my new normal, which is incredibly sad, especially for my friends and family to see. And although I may look like I'm doing better on the outside, there's things that are not, and I don't know if they'll ever be the same.
I'm sorry for the experience that you went through. And, I'm really sorry that we have individuals in positions of power, like Mr. Lafelt, who have a twisted view on reality. And they're imposing that twisted view on you and your lives. It's really tragic and it's sad. And what's even worse is that now you're the one to blame because you two contrived these situations, according to Ms. Graves, that you created this.
Sorry.
You wanted this to happen, Ms. Turner. That's what Mrs.
I never said that.
It's in your testimony.
I did not say that Ms. McNabb contrived the situation. I actually think the lesson from her situation is around concussion protocol.
Let me ask, do you really believe the experiences that they've experienced? Ms. McNabb, do you really believe that she wanted to face all of these medical issues?
I think what happened to her is tragic. There are hundreds of thousands of injuries that are preventable.
So why aren't you standing up for her?
I actually have. I said that this was terrible, and I have solutions that don't involve bullying.
Thank you, Ms. Graves.
People.
Look, I think that it's sick and twisted that individuals want to make women have to sword fight men. And it's sick and twisted that individuals want to make individuals have to take a spiked ball to the forehead if that's what it takes for a trans person to play. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Ms. Randall from Washington.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Mr. Lieberman, when the IRA was originally sold, it was sold to the American people as a legislative vehicle for reducing inflation and for stimulating the economy and creating lots of jobs, lots of new clean energy jobs. But what has the actual result of the legislation been?
Well, there are a lot of jobs right now. I think we're going through the sugar high phase of the Inflation Reduction Act. Sure, you can create a lot of jobs if you throw a lot of money at just about anything, especially lots of federal dollars. The question is, do these alternative energy sources have any lasting power? The American people are not pounding the table demanding higher utility bills and more expensive transportation. And so these alternatives need to become cost competitive to have any real future. And I just don't see that happening with most of the alternative being subsidized right now. And I would say there's a long history with this, and it doesn't bode very well. Congress is not nearly as good as it thinks it is in figuring out what the next big thing in energy is. It's been trying this since the oil shocks of the 1970s, but there's been a lot of boondoggles along the way. Not really much in the way of alternative energy success stories that we can point to. One example I could mention from when I was a staffer 10 years ago, when the next big thing was cellulosic biofuels. I don't know if you remember cellulosic, but there were all sorts of tax credits and other incentives adding up to dollars per gallon, very similar to what you see for other things in the Inflation Reduction Act. The facilities were built, and it turned into a boondoggle, including a lot of communities that felt cheated because the permanent jobs never materialized. I fear that if we come back in 5 years, we'll be talking about a number of clean energy ghost towns as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, in 1850, the economist Frederick Bastiat wrote, I think, about this scenario back then and recognized that you could make the argument that you're creating a lot of jobs by going down the street and breaking windows, right? Because somebody has to be employed to replace those windows. But there's a fallacy with that because of the destructive nature and the wealth that's destroyed in that process. Would you agree that this holds true with the IRA today?
Yeah, when you're creating jobs only because of subsidies, that means that money and jobs has to be siphoned away from the rest of the economy. So there's always two sides of the jobs ledger when government subsidies are involved, and we're talking about potentially $1 trillion. Plus, if at the end of the day you have more expensive energy, that also suppresses economic activity and jobs.
Thank you. Dr. McBride, your organization, the Tax Foundation, it's not partisan, correct? It's a nonpartisan organization.
That is correct.
Okay, so in 2023, you co-authored a piece published by the Tax Foundation, which included several key findings, which I think are relevant to today's debates. You stated in that piece that the IRA doesn't reduce deficits and may substantially increase deficits. The energy credits drive the out-of-control costs of the IRA, and the energy credits are a boon for wealthy individuals with a preference for climate-oriented luxury goods, including expensive EVs and solar panels. So my question is this: do those findings that you wrote originally, do they still hold true today?
Yes, absolutely. As far as we can tell, we lack good estimates from the committees that do this and from the agencies, the CBO and JCT. I went through the latest estimates we have from JCT and other groups, outside groups, indicating the cost of the IRA credits is something like 3 to 4 times what they originally were estimated at. So that was that's one side of this bill. The other side is the tax increases. One is the drug pricing measure that's actually the result of a tax change, excise tax on drug companies. Some of the others are the corporate alternative minimum tax and the stock buyback tax. So these are brand new taxes that were introduced as part of the IRA. We don't know how much those are raising, honestly. We have done a lot of research to try to build out our understanding of how much revenue is raised by those taxes, but they were originally estimated to raise on the order of $300 billion between those two tax increases. If that is still the case today, which is questionable for many reasons I can go into in more detail, it may be much less than $300 billion that is raised there. Compared to the $1 trillion that is the rough cost of the IRA credits, we can see that this is a big deficit increasing bill, completely contrary to the way it was sold originally.
Thank you. My time has expired. I did have questions for Dr. Trish, but hopefully someone will yield me time. And with that, I turn to Ranking Member Frost for his questions.
The sponsor of the bill and Subcommittee Chairman Burlison from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm here to urge you to support the Guidance Clarity Act, H.R. 2409. This is a bipartisan bill. It ensures transparency and fairness by requiring federal agencies to clearly state on each guidance document, and I quote, "The contents of this document do not have the force and effect of law and do not of themselves bind the public or the agency in any way. This document is intended only to provide clarity to the public regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies." This bill is about clarity. Agency guidance plays a vital role in helping the public understand how agencies interpret law and policies. But too often the agencies abuse this tool. They issue guidance that intimidates small businesses and individuals into compliance, sometimes under the threat of enforcement. Many lack the legal resources to know what guidance is not, that it's not binding, and they feel forced to comply with what's merely an agency's opinion. How is that transparent or fair? This bill will fix this. It's also about accountability. Agencies have been known to skirt the Administrative Procedures Act requirements for issuing binding rules by slipping so-called non-rule rules into guidance documents. Courts have struck down these tactics, but the problem persists. During President Trump's first term, the Justice Department took steps to prevent enforcement based on guidance alone, but those protections were rescinded under President Biden. The threat of abuse is real, and it undermines the trust in our government. The Guidance Clarity Act closes it by ensuring that guidance cannot be mistaken for something that people that were actually elected, lawmakers, passed as law. Finally, this bill is about protecting small businesses and ordinary Americans who often can't afford legal teams to challenge agency overreach. They deserve to know in plain language that guidance is just that, guidance, not a mandate. This bill empowers them to push back without fear of unfair enforcement. Members of the committee, this is a straightforward solution to a real problem. It promotes transparency, upholds the rule of law, and protects those who can least afford to navigate the bureaucratic overreach. Last Congress, the Oversight Committee favorably reported an identical version of this bill. And let's build on that momentum, and I urge my colleagues to support the bill. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Burlison, on this bill. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield to Mr. Lynch.
I thank the gentlelady. Let's be clear. I mean, if you really think that this is a clarification by putting this statement on each guidance, have you ever taken a bill that we pass and try to read it? Especially when it refers to maybe a half dozen other bills that we have passed in previous Congresses? It's complete gobbledygook when you read the statute. When you read the statute, it is totally confounding. You can't put 5 sentences together to come up with a lucid thought when you read it. To suggest that a business owner, a small business owner, Mr. Chairman, would go to the statute and try to figure out what the hell Congress intended is lunacy. Look at some of the bills that we pass here. Read the text. It's completely incomprehensible. It doesn't make sense at all. The guidance is there as a synthesis of what congressional intent is on that piece of legislation. It actually helps to translate the complex, legalistic, statutory language that Congress has enacted. It allows that small business owner to act in compliance with that statute. And I totally get the gentleman's point that sometimes a particular agency might go afield of the guidance or might misstate the guidance. And we challenge that on occasion when we believe that congressional intent is not being followed. That becomes a matter for the courts because they read the statute, they look at the guidance, and sometimes, which happened recently in financial services, there's a direct order to modify the guidance. That's what they did with the SEC. They changed the guidance for banks on cryptocurrency. So I get the spirit of the gentleman's bill, and it's been here before. I think Mr. Palmer was a sponsor in previous Congresses. So I get that. But to disavow or to discount the value of that guidance, I think, creates great confusion. It undermines the rule of law. It undermines the rule of law. It does not assist the rule of law or clarify the rule of law. It creates confusion and doubt in terms of how we conduct ourselves in this society, right? The laws in this country are the software of our democracy. It embodies rights and ideals and provides recourse for those who feel that their rights of freedom, the freedom to contract, private property, all those elements that make us Americans. This would be corrosive, I believe, to that effort to maintain the rule of law at a very time when we need it so desperately. You know, as members of this committee know, you know, we, in our oversight responsibility, we travel frequently to failed states, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq or Somalia. We've been to all those places time and time again. And one of the common elements of a failed state is that they lack an adherence to the rule of law, and in many cases they lack an independent judiciary. So I think this type of confusion, of diluting the force of law by dismissive language on guidance will harm adherence to the rule of law. It will damage the respect for the rule of law by adding frivolous language to the guidance that means to interpret that very law. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members wish to be heard? The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying.
The gentleman's time's expired. I now recognize Mr. Burlison from Missouri.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I just want to remind people there's a huge difference between money that an individual voluntarily gives to a nonprofit or charity and the money that is forcibly taken from taxpayers and funneled through this town into a nonprofit or charity. There is a huge difference, correct, Mr. Walter?
Absolutely.
Mr. Krikorian?
Yes, of course.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
And Ms. Yentl, wouldn't you agree there's a huge difference?
There's a difference, sure.
Okay,
And
thank
there's
you.
a difference in
Thank you.
accounting and auditing and
There is. Thank
oversight
you.
and
Thank you. I'm going to
transparency
get my
as well.
time back here. It's a
Sure.
simple question. So here, with that being said, the problem that it doesn't seem like anyone is recognizing is that we forcibly took money from taxpayers, and then these groups, then it was appropriated through the Biden administration, billions of taxpayer dollars to organizations that were stood up overnight. Organizations that didn't have a long-standing history. These were not nonprofits. For example, the Free Press investigation revealed that of the $27 billion was granted to the through the EPA, $20 billion went out the door to 8 nonprofit groups right after Biden lost the election. $20 billion shoved out the door immediately. Several of them were formed that year, in August of, or since August of that year. So, Mr. Walter, did your organization, do you guys get billions of dollars when Republicans are in charge?
We have never taken a penny from any level of government across 4 decades of existence.
Mr. Turner?
Sir, if I got $2 billion from the taxpayers, I'd be in jail right now.
Mr. Krikorian?
We have had contracts in the past with the Census Bureau and the Justice Department, but nobody's given us $2 billion. If you know anybody who's in the market for that, I'm giving my phone number.
Yeah, so I think that here's the point to the American people. When the Republicans are in charge, we're not doling out your money to our friends and our family. We're not raiding the coffers. We're not putting America into more debt and more debt and more debt to fund these nonprofits. Look, Mr. Welter, if somebody wants to give to Stacey Abrams' new venture, her nonprofit, they can do that, right? She could stand up a nonprofit.
Absolutely.
But the question is, Mr. Krikorian, nobody wants to open up their checkbook, right?
I wish. Yeah, I've been working on that.
And that's the very reason why they come to this town, is to convince lawmakers, their friends, their family member, their ally, to write a check that no one in the private sector would want to write for an effort that no one really would want to believe in. Mr. Turner, is it true that the Biden senior climate policy advisor, Jai Wise, directed $5 billion to a Coalition for Green Capital?
Yes.
And let's point out, she worked for the Coalition for Green Capital, right? She previously worked for them.
Yes.
So she sent money to the organization that $5 billion. Is that not blatant corruption, Mr. Turner?
And not only that, sir, $5 billion is very difficult to spend. $5 billion is an absurd amount of money. We heard a congresswoman talk about the jet that President Trump got. That was $400 million. This is $5 billion. It's impossible to spend $5 billion ethically.
Yeah, to put that in context, I remember being in the state of Missouri, and Missourians, at one point, whenever I was a lawmaker, we spent $5 billion for all the school districts in the state of Missouri. Okay, so they funded every school district, the state funds. That was $5 billion. How much money did the Biden administration give specifically to Rewiring America initiative, where Mrs. Abrams was brought on as a senior counsel?
Approximately $2 billion.
$2 billion. So let me get this straight. Progressive loyalists like Abrams and other senior admin officials left the admin and feathered their nest on their way out with our taxpayer dollars, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize
Mr. Burlison for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this very critical hearing on the federal government in the age of artificial intelligence. As we explore the AI's ability to transform this economy and the potential that it has to enhance federal program efficiency, combat fraud, and deliver better services to the American people, we must address a fundamental challenge to this, and that is our federal procurement system. Our current system is riddled with barriers, lengthy certification processes, complex reseller networks, and multi-year contract vehicles that prevent agencies from accessing innovations or AI solutions, particularly from smaller companies. This procurement challenge not only hinders efficiency, but also threatens America's global leadership in AI. In the last Congress, the 118th Congress, my bill, the FIT Procurement Act, was reported favorably out of this committee and then successfully passed the House with bipartisan support last year. I will be introducing the FIT Procurement Act again shortly, but let me point out that my bill directly tackles our outdated federal procurement system. This act streamlines federal acquisition to empower agencies to further acquire cutting-edge commercial technologies like AI. It does this by simply raising the simplified acquisition threshold from $250,000 to $500,000, increasing the micro purchase threshold from $10K to $25K, and allowing advanced payments for subscription-based software, which is what we see so readily today that the federal government is not able to take advantage of. With unanimous bipartisan support in the last Congress, this act is a proven common sense reform to modernize government, save taxpayer dollars, and reposition the United States as a continued leader in the AI-driven future. And I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about that. And so let me begin. Mrs. Miller, in your testimony, you discuss why agencies should buy commercial technology rather than build custom code. As someone who was an in-house custom coder, I couldn't agree with you more. Could you follow up and elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, the point I was making in my testimony about that was that it creates technical debt when you're creating your code yourself. And because AI is moving so quickly, frequently it'll be obsolete soon after it's built. And so it makes sense to contract with vendors who have more updated tools. I would just add that the bill that you're referring to, given my own small company's challenges, getting access to small pilot projects and proofs of concept, given those very low thresholds, this would be very beneficial to small, innovative technology companies.
Thank you. I don't have to now ask my follow-up question. Is it true that AI can be used to detect fraud in the grant process effectively?
Yeah, there's so many great use cases for AI in the fraud space when it comes to grants. We can scan through information using open source intelligence. AI models, large language models, can sort that information incredibly quickly within seconds and spot anomalies humans would not be able to spot. Even if we were, a lot of times what is happening today are grant processors are pulling up Google and opening up different screens and looking for things on different sites. Sometimes they have access to open source intelligence tools, but they're still manually checking for that. AI makes that incredibly quick.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw, you've highlighted the federal government's procurement problem in their process. Based on your experience, direct experience, do you believe that changes to the procurement process allowing agencies to pilot products like yours before going enterprise-wide would allow smaller companies like you to better compete for contracts?
Yes, we believe that strongly. I think there's a variety of ways to do that. One, creating more POC type programs. A good example is I think it's called the Investment Horizon pilot program that the Office of the CIO of the Navy has implemented. But the challenge is every agency seems to have their own set of ways that they procure new technologies. So to the extent that we can help to normalize that will help us also navigate. For example, through the FedRAMP process that I've described, of the 8.5 million, 600,000 I spent on consultants to help me figure out the process.
Just to get certified.
Yeah, so it's like, I couldn't have spent that on maybe more innovation or other areas. So I think that if you have innovator programs or ways for us to start with other agencies that are less security focused, will be a big help.
Is it safe to say the federal government is a pain in the ass client?
It is a complex web, and if you ever want to do a secret shopper with me one day, and you can sort of watch how this plays out, I'd be very happy to show you what it looks like.
Thank you.
I yield back.
All right, now.
He yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Burlison from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Hu, it's been talked about a lot in this hearing about the potential threats and risks of foreign actor getting access to Americans' DNA records. Can you elaborate on what is the potential risks that we are facing?
Yes, some of the risks include, for example, blackmail, using it in order to exploit and try to make individuals more vulnerable, greater surveillance risks, and as was discussed, potential biochemical, biometric types of warfare. But I do think that there's also potential AI-driven targeting risks as well.
Mm-hmm. And then, this isn't new. I mean, the hospitals, providers, their electronic medical records they're attempted to be hacked all the time. Have you heard of what the street value of someone's medical record is?
Well,
at one point I'd heard that it's over $50,000 or more. It's probably a lot more today. Mr. Savage, one of my questions has to do with how the hack occurred in 2023. Is it correct that individuals who had stolen, passwords from other businesses then used that in a form that's called stuffing, where they used an automated system to take, say, the hacked passwords and accounts from another company and then just rolled through those to see if those same passwords were used on your site. Am I getting that accurately?
That's generally accurate. It is something called credential stuffing, whereby a user, and we all have done this, is use the same username and password on multiple websites.
Right.
And other websites were hacked, and they were able to obtain those usernames and passwords, and then they tried them on 23andMe, and they were able to access a number of accounts to get into and take the DNA relative information.
And so the mechanisms that you've put in place to stop that from happening in the future are that you check to see, you send a text message to verify that somebody's logging in from that was the original individual, or what other steps do you take?
Right after the cybersecurity incident, the first thing we did was force every consumer to reset their password. And as part of that process,
they couldn't use the previous one.
They couldn't use the previous one, and we also checked that password against known hacked passwords, right? Just to make sure that the same thing wasn't going to be happening with another credential stuffing.
I think if the American people are listening, you should never use the same password for different website businesses.
Yeah, that's a very good
just
process,
a good
right?
policy to
Also
follow.
great. And
Okay.
then second, you also mentioned we did also implement two-factor authentication, whereby either, basically we actually then either sent the customer a text message or an email confirming that it was them, and they entered that code to make sure that there was an additional layer of security, a second factor
Yeah.
to access their account.
Thank you. Ms. Wuchitsky, is that correct? I think that one of the things that's kind of striking me is that when someone enters into an agreement, they know your company, they know your reputation, they know you. I think what we're kind of going through is a situation where potentially what the trust that was placed in you because of this situation is in jeopardy if somebody else gets access to that information. The question is, what will they do with that? So one of my questions is, do you think that there should be a law that upon the sale of a business, that an individual has to reconfirm that they want that company to have, the new company to have access to their data?
Thank you for that question. I'm a huge believer that people should have choice and transparency. So I think it's a complicated question, the one you just asked, because there's individuals, for instance, like my sister, who recently passed away of lung cancer, who established a lung cancer community in 23andMe and feels very passionately about identifying genetic risk for non-smoking lung cancer. So she is deceased. She opted in to research because she really cared about that mission. And it was really important for her to be able to do, lung cancer is massively underfunded. It is one of the poorest funded areas. So how could we all come together? So how could she possibly reconsent?
I just have one more question. So when a separate company that you've created, had a contract with, and you shared some of that data, what mechanisms do you have to protect and make sure that company is not then reselling it and sharing that data?
That would have been part of the contract. So for example, with GSK, they were looking at aggregate statistics. They could not go and then share that with other partners.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Presley.
Burlison from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. I, like everyone in my constituents, are fed up with watching Washington squander their money on frivolous programs and bloated bureaucracies, which is why the Department of Government Efficiency was the most exciting thing that when I went back home and talked to constituents about. It's the most exciting thing that was happening with this administration. And look, this is an example of what private sector can do when it's evaluating a bloated public sector system that seems to be resistant to everything. When I spoke with Mr. Musk, I warned him. I said, this place is a swamp for a reason, and you cannot rely on the politicians and the people in this town to help you in evaluating or determining places to cut. They will only deliver what they want, right? And there's a reason why Congress, it being in our hands, we're at $37 trillion in debt, and we have all of these wasted expenditures. So, Mr. Dickerson, I'm going to ask you three the same question. If you had anything to say to the Doge efforts, to the Doge team, and to Mr. Musk, what would you say?
I would say keep up the good, it's been a good start so far, and keep up the good work.
Mr. Burton?
Excuse me. I think there's a need for them to get beyond just canceling grants and starting to work with you to draft legislation to make these changes permanent. If Congress ultimately doesn't act, either through appropriations bills or rescissions, it's going to be ephemeral. There's also the need to make changes on the regulatory front. There's needs to change various secretary directives. They need to take it to the next step to bring it home, and they haven't done that.
Thank you. Mr. Lips?
I agree with that point. I think the most important thing they could do now would be to work with the members of this committee and the Congress on government efficiency reforms, many of which I think should have broad support among lawmakers.
Ms. DeVito, let me ask you this. You've seen a lot of the Doge cuts and the programs. Is there a single one that you would have agreed with? A single one?
Part of the problem, I think, with Doge...
Answer yes or no. Don't eat up my time. Is there a single one that you would have agreed with?
I don't think there is a yes or no answer to that question.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to waste my time. I want to dive into Mr. Burton and what you said. So the question is, why isn't Congress, what should happen to force Congress to actually make these cuts that have been identified?
Congress needs to legislate, and it hasn't been. I mean, the GAO has made countless proposals. The improper payments have been around for decades and literally involve trillions of dollars. No one's fixed that. That's one of the few things, though, that the administration has the ability through administrative changes to do on their own, because they're legally required not to spend that money, and yet it's going on. Congress needs to appropriate, the appropriators. There needs to be changes in the authorizing committee. A lot of the grants that the chairwoman was referencing could be prohibited through authorizing legislation. Congress needs to legislate, and at some level, it sort of has forgotten how to do so.
Do you think that we could?
Yes.
You do?
In fact, I'm old enough to remember when you guys did.
Well, I may be just above being black-pilled at this point, so you're giving me a little bit of hope here. But if Mr. Dickerson, if you could make one significant change, what would be the most significant change or policy change that we could do that would save taxpayers' dollars?
I think one of the most important things you can do is exactly what you're doing in the One Big Beautiful Bill reconciliation package, which is reform our welfare programs that literally pay people to stay out of the workforce and have entirely the wrong disincentives, so that we can actually preserve benefits for people who are actually needy, right? Things like income verification that Mr. Timmons was talking about, that's so essential to do.
Mr. Lips, if you could change one thing, if we passed one thing, what would we do?
I'd recommend strengthening the death or the do not pay data that's available to the Treasury Department. This is a bipartisan measure that could be, I think, passed through the House and Senate. It would provide access to Treasury to stop improper payments and end fraud.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman.
Mr. Epstein, recently I toured a company called Radiant, met with the CEO, Doug Bernauer, who is an amazing individual, who was challenged by Elon Musk to help to colonize Mars, and came to the conclusion the only way to provide electricity, get electricity to Mars was through micronuclear. I also met Isaiah Taylor with Valar Atomics, which is an amazing, very creative company that's using carbon sequestration in their process to combine it with other, like with oxygen or hydrogen, in order to create jet fuel, which is just mind-blowing You get electricity, and the byproduct is jet fuel. With that being said, can you speak to how the regulatory process for these guys who are doing very creative, very innovative stuff might be stifling to that mindset?
Yeah, I admire these guys for trying, because it's so difficult to do things. I mean, for all the reasons I mentioned, the licensing process, it can be difficult to test things. The whole linear no threshold in ALARA as low as reasonably achievable. So all these dogmas, as I said, can be changed, and it'll just radically open the frontier for innovation where companies like these can go very quickly from idea to action. Right now, there's just an enormous gap between idea to action. One other thing that needs to change, I think, is the cultural discussion of nuclear. We heard from Ranking Member Frost and I think some others that like 3 Mile Island was the problem, but as Scott Perry pointed out, like 3 Mile Island is not fundamentally a problem. Like the fact that the worst nuclear accident we've had is something that killed nobody, that should be celebrating nuclear. So we need to stop demonizing nuclear like The Simpsons did. We need to recognize it's fundamentally safe. It's not safe primarily because of regulation. It's safe because the material cannot explode like combustion can.
Thank you. One last question, Mr. Smith. When I speak to them, they refer to it, the 18-month period. Can you describe the dynamic of getting the permitting process done and why companies that are ready to go today are having to go through an 18-month period?
Which 18-month period?
For review.
For review. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to reduce review times. One example is actually the mandatory hearings that Alex mentioned in his testimony as well. So those kinds of reviews don't involve input from the public, and they already cut times from 6 months to 3 months by moving from in-person oral hearings to written testimony and submissions. And there's a lot of opportunities to cut those down and see the kinds of things like Governor Cox wants to see in Utah of, we can build something by July 4th, 2026. We can have test reactors that we don't push companies to the Philippines or outside of the US to test and experiment what used to be and started as an American technology.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this hearing. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for an opening statement. A new age for nuclear power has started, led by President Trump's 4 recent executive orders on nuclear energy and congressional action to reinvigorate the nuclear industry. President Trump's orders call for permitting reform and the reduction of overburdensome regulations from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which has become a slow-moving bureaucratic mess, constraining and delaying expansion of U.S. nuclear power deployment for decades. Under President Trump's orders, the NRC must rule on reactor license applications within 18 months, a dramatic shift from the ambiguous open-ended timelines of the past. President Trump's orders also promote expanding domestic mining, enrichment of uranium and other reactor fuels, and nuclear fuel recycling. These groundbreaking actions will power United States energy independence and provide a secure and reliable U.S. electrical grid, something that we must obtain as the AI revolution places surging demands on our electricity capacity. At the heart of nuclear power's resurgence are 2 key innovations: small and micro modular reactors. These new reactors promise the U.S. will have a strong answer to future energy demands. They will be more capital effective, more efficient, and more scalable for both on and off-grid sites here in the United States. Moreover, they offer enhanced safety features, eliminate the risk of meltdowns, and can use recycled fuel from other reactors. The Department of Energy predicts that 12% of electricity consumption in the United States in the year 2028 will come from data centers, which require constant and consistent electricity. And the Energy Information Agency recently projected that the U.S. power consumption will reach all-time highs this year and next, in part due to AI and data center demand. Nuclear power is the answer to data centers' growing appetite for stable energy. I recently toured 2 prototype micro-modular reactors being developed here in the United States. I can confidently say the technology is ready. What is holding nuclear back is the onerous and capital-intensive regulatory permitting burden placed on nuclear energy expansion. Under the Trump administration, the federal government is waking up to the roadblock that nuclear power has faced for decades. The federal government not technology, has been in the way. Congress should and will be watching for the fruits of the administration's actions and eager to cooperate in achieving this lasting change. Nuclear power in the age of SMRs and MMRs isn't just safe, it's essential. It is our best shot at securing clean, reliable American energy independence. And with that, thank you, Mr. Burns. I was finding it ironic as I was sitting here listening to your testimony that your name is Mr. Burns.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've heard that
Yes.
joke before.
Yes, I have. And in fact, I was in a French airport once, and I realized that they had given me the wrong luggage tag. And I heard the woman at the desk call down to the luggage handler, and he said, she's the name, and he said, Comme Monsieur Burns? I said, yes, like Mr. Burns. He was referring to The Simpsons. So anyway, yes, it's been a kind of a joke over the years. A good one.
Well, thank you for that. All right, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and I'll begin with Mr. Smith. I was recently told by one company based here in the United States that they will have a fully functioning MMR abroad in the next year. They specifically stated that they couldn't accomplish that in the United States, that they'd have to go on foreign soil to demonstrate to the American public and the government that their technology is ready. What's holding back companies like that from doing this in the United States?
Thank you. Fundamentally, the problem is we have too many barriers between people who want to build and their ability to put shovels in the ground and put up structures. So take one example, it's important that we do continued modeling. It's important that we continue doing extensive testing, but we also need to do real life testing rather than just rely on the data that we currently use. In particular, one of the exciting recent state-level endeavors is as Governor Spencer Cox in Utah signed a memorandum of understanding with Valor Atomics to develop an SMR within Utah by July 4th, 2026. I just got back from the American Legislative Exchange Council meetings with state legislators from across the country. Every single energy conversation was pulled in by some gravitational force to talk about nuclear policy and what they could do. There's extensive interest and opportunity, but the states need to actually be allowed to lead.
I'm going to jump to one of my questions then regarding the states. How would they be better suited than the federal government for regulating this?
One of the key differences between the designs of the 60s and 70s and today is they're very, very different. So there's little need for containment structures in some of these new designs, and part of the problem with having a lot of expertise at the NRC is simply that they have a hammer, they see everything as a nail, and so we have a problem where new companies come in, they don't need a containment chamber or containment facility for their design, and yet the NRC prescriptive regulations say thou shalt have one. And so state-level interest can develop new rules that avoid this kind of old problem. And we could do some of this at the federal level, of course. I think there's room for Congress to get involved and spin off new agencies within the NRC or separately entirely to pursue these new designs. States have already taken the right kinds of steps. Either in Texas has been developing an advanced nuclear working group. Utah similarly has an Office of an Energy Development official who's purely devoted to nuclear now, in addition to extensive legislative efforts within the state Congress. So very exciting and lots to do.
Thank you. Mr. Epstein, what approach should the United States be taking in regards to this? Should we follow the model of the previous administration where we use taxpayer dollars to subsidize this development, or should we let the free market dictate what happens?
Well, definitely free market, but it really hinges on how you're approaching the issue of safety. And I really want to push against any idea that the NRC has been a success. The NRC has been one of the greatest failures in policy history. So we hear things like, oh, the NRC was helpful maintaining the nuclear fleet. Well, why are we saying maintaining? It's because they prevented anything from being done from 1975 when the NRC was founded until 2023. Not one new plant went from conception to completion. So if nuclear is the safest form of energy ever, and it was safer than any form of energy before the NRC, and the NRC basically criminalized it, that's a failure. So we need to recognize the NRC as it exists is a failure. Now, that doesn't mean that it necessarily shouldn't exist. I do believe states have a real role, but we need radical reform. So it needs to be done within the law. It needs to be done at the NRC. In particular, we need some good commissioners. We don't have enough commissioners right now, but we need commissioners who can radically reform the NRC, and we need innovation at the state level. Because what we really want is abundant energy. If we just do a bunch of subsidies, then we're just going to have another subsidized energy industry. That's not what we need. We want to unleash an unsubsidized energy industry.
And what's happening with the manufacturing of these micro nuclear reactors is that they're eventually wanting to get it to scale. That's the only way that you're going to do this that's cost effective. And yet, what I'm told is that they have to get these permitted. Each one, it would have to go through the same process as if you're doing a large-scale nuclear site. Is that correct, Mr. Smith?
I believe so. And the Idaho National Laboratory in April 2025 report suggested legislative reforms to enable general licenses. So after you have your first of a kind, you would be able to apply, and through some notice and regulatory requirements, you would still be able to apply and build your reactor under a general license. But I believe that INL's advice requires legislative action.
That would only make sense, right? All right. Thank you, everyone. It takes such great courage to come forward, and we acknowledge that, and I hope that you see that we are taking that seriously. And so very thankful for what you're doing today. I'm also very thankful for previous witnesses that have come forward. I see Matthew Brown in the audience. He courageously stepped forward and was as a witness. I encourage everybody to look and seek his testimony. I want to thank the people that came in our first hearing. Ryan Graves, David Grush, David Fravor. And in our second hearing, Admiral Gallaudet, Lou Elizondo, and Mr. Gold. And the many others that have come forward. We hear you, and it's time that we, enough is enough. It's time that we take action. Look, I'm not jumped to the conclusion that I believe that there are, aliens coming from another planet. But I'm open to that. And I think that it's our responsibility, especially when we're seeing that we have a government that is actively blocking information from us. Just last night, I tried to get an amendment onto the National Defense Authorization Act that fit in the germaneness of that bill to have UAP disclosure. And conveniently, it was named non-germane, mostly deemed by staff, not even an elected official. This is the kind of stuff that we repeatedly see. Last year, we were blocked by someone in House administration from being able to receive a full briefing from Arrow. So not an elected official, but someone in staff blocked us. And I've had it. Enough is enough. I want to cue up a video that I've been given. And as before it starts, I'm going to describe. This was taken October 30th of 2024. This video is of an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb, or this object, off the coast of Yemen. You'll see that another MQ-9 launched a Hellfire missile. You cannot see that drone. And so I'm not going to explain it to you. You'll see exactly what it does. This is when it zoomed out, so you can still see it traveling. So, Mr. Knapp, have you heard about events like this occurring? And what information might you have?
I have heard about events like this. I have heard about this event. Jeremy Corbell and I talked about it in one of our episodes a while back. We did not have the video, though. There are servers where there's a whole bank of these kind of videos that Congress has not been allowed to see, that the public hasn't been allowed to see. Occasionally, some of that stuff gets out in the wild, and it comes our way. It should be going to you. The public should be seeing this stuff. And why you're not allowed to, I don't know. But that's a Hellfire missile smacking into that UFO and just bounced right off. and it kept going.
It kept going, and it looks like the debris was taken with it.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
So
what
again,
flies like that?
again, I'm not going to speculate what it is, but the question is, why are we being blocked from this information consistently? I want to ask this just question: how in the world? This is the document. I want to enter this in for the record if it hasn't already been entered, Madam Chair. The document
So
that you
ordered.
provided on thread 3. This is a huge file. How in the world did you smuggle this out of Russia?
Carefully.
In your socks?
I don't think I want to be really specific about it because I might have to go back there and get some more sometime. Although,
Okay.
no, that'd be crazy to do that. Well, I took the top pages off that were stamped with the security signature, and I carried them out on my person. But the rest of them I just threw in my suitcase and threw some caviar in there as a distraction as well, and hoped for the best. Otherwise, I'd be a citizen of Siberia right now.
And you had you reported James Lakatsky came to you with government possession of NHI craft and how they ultimately gained entry. Can you testify to the veracity of that claim?
Dr. Lakatsky is an honorable man who served most of his career with the DIA, a very trusted, high-level rocket scientist and intelligence analyst who inspired the OSAP program, as I said earlier. And in full disclosure, I've co-written 2 books with him. He dropped this on myself and our other co-author out of the blue. And it took 14 months for us to get DOPSR approval for him to release 2 sentences on that. He said this craft, we had managed to get inside of it. It had no wings, no rotor, no tail. It had no fuel tanks. They didn't know how it flew or how it was operated. It clearly looked like it was aerodynamic, but he would not go further. He's a by-the-book guy, and until he gets clearance to say more about that, I don't think we're going to hear much more. But it's not ours. It wasn't ours. We didn't make it. We didn't know who made it and how it was built and how it operated. We've got at least one. And I don't know, I think that's enough confirmation that we do have recovered disks and materials.
Leslie, Mr. Borland, in the classified realm, have you been exposed to undeniable confirmation of NHI technology? And then my second question is Base Systems involved in any way with reverse engineering exploitation of non-human intelligence craft?
Yeah, we're gonna have to have a conversation this Skip for that. Whether I'm legally even allowed to answer that, and whether you're even allowed to hear it, sir.
Okay. Again, you can sense our frustration. And so I just want to thank you for coming forward. We will continue to fight because, look, this is about making sure that this government belongs to the people and restoring the republic the way it was intended to be. Madam Chair, I also have further witnesses of courageous individuals. It was given to me by Dr. Stephen Greer, including Michael Herrera and his testimony. We have Roderick Castle and his testimony, Randy Anderson, his testimony, Stephen Digna, and others, 3 others, all saying similar things to what the witnesses today have said, and I would like to enter that into the record as well.
No objection.
Thank you.
I now recognize Representative Lee.
I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Eric Burlison.
Thank you, Representative Gill. Mr. Wiggins, Chief Wiggins, in your view, what mechanisms such as internal protocols, witness debriefings, or cross-agency documentation should be better established in order to ensure that such a credible sighting like the one that you have given are preserved and made available to oversight bodies like this?
Thank you, sir. As a active duty Navy member, our mission is to carry out the ship's mission or the command's mission. And we, on a general basis, don't have knowledge of what to do when we see things like this. We just don't. We're there to do our mission and do what's told of us, right? So I think what would be important is giving active duty members a clear way of being able to report things like this to where it gets to this point. And ensuring that we have a standard level of understanding that there wouldn't be any level of reprisal or anything happening. Because, you know, I've been in the Navy for almost 24 years, but what about the sailors that have been in for 2 years that experience things like this? They're not going to have the knowledge, or they'll probably be a little bit more fearful to speak up, being it that their career is just starting.
Yeah, I want to commend you. You're the first witness to come forward that is currently serving, and it's recognized. And so I thank you. And your testimony is unbelievable. Let me ask this question. Are you familiar with the Witness Protection Act that Representative Burchett has filed?
I'm not too familiar, sir.
Anyone on the committee familiar with it? It's fantastic. It's the language that we need. It's language that will protect whistleblowers from any kind of reprisal, and yet it's again and again blocked by this body in some way. Many a times it's being blocked not by elected officials but by staff behind the scenes. And the other bill, the UAP Disclosure Act, which was filed last year, Senator Schumer, who I cannot believe that there's a topic that he and I agree on, but he and I agree on this topic. He has sponsored it in the Senate. He put it on the National Defense Authorization Act last year. Remarkably, I can't get it on it was stripped out by the House last year, and I can't get it onto the bill leaving the House this year. Mr. Knapp, how far would that bill go to actually getting the answers that we need?
Pretty far. I think that they're still going to have roadblocks. You know, the keepers of the secrets, the private companies that have been doing this job for intelligence agencies for a long time, are not going to cough it up. You'd have to force it out of them. And whether you can get them to admit that they have it or not, I mean, they're supposed to lie about it. They've been lying about it. More power to you. I hope it works. I hope it passes this time. But it's a daunting challenge to get them to open up after lying about it for more than 75 years.
Yeah. And then finally, Mr. Borland, when you engaged with Arrow in 2023, you noted that their public statements did not match the reality that you and others had witnessed. In your assessment, what were the key limitations of Arrow?
You know, I would put it to you this way. The statement Arrow has made is scientific evidence of extraterrestrials. Scientific evidence requires a scientific control. Extraterrestrial is an entity on another planet. The only way to scientifically prove extraterrestrial is we have to go to that planet, acquire technology, bring it back, and compare it to what we have here.
So you're saying they won't let anything out or they won't come forward unless they confirm that unless they go to the planet and confirm where its origin is?
That would be scientific evidence, yes. And by that statement, Arrow found no scientific evidence of extraterrestrials is basically, I don't want to call it a psyop, but a misrepresentation, because we do have things. But making that statement is not technically a lie. It's a misrepresentation of the full truth.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize Representative Burlison.
Mr. Nusatelli, when you heard the testimony of Mr. Knapp talking about these missiles were shut down or turned on in Russia, does that remind you, when you hear these stories, it's got to remind you of the event that happened on your base?
Absolutely. There are many accounts of incursions of this type taking place. I believe in the 60s we had a similar incursion in New England, and same thing happened. There were these objects coming over the base at low altitude, 200 feet over the base security police, and they were scrambling fighters, and then the objects would just fly off, and that went on for weeks. So the historical record has laid out that there's a pattern, that our installations are visited by these craft. You know, they come in and do whatever they're doing, and then they leave. And we don't know how to respond. We don't know how to protect the installation. So that's why we're here.
When you first heard, and we're having to report on these incidents that were being witnessed by other individuals, did you believe them? Did you yourself believe it would be true until you saw it?
Yeah, these are people I've worked with for years, deployed with. I was in some of the weddings. These are people that I worked with every day of my life. Usually when the events were occurring, we were all together. There'd be 40, 60, 100 people on duty during these encounters.
Really?
Yeah.
All seeing it at the same time?
Yes, these encounters were playing out while we were on duty, and we were responding and investigating in real time as they occurred.
And as you said, the importance of your operation was highly important because they said it's the most important in 25 years, the research that you were conducting.
For that particular launch, we had 500 Air Force police officers guarding the launch. 500 people. It was that critical.
Wow.
But had this thing showed up, we wouldn't have been able to do anything to prevent it showing up.
Real quickly, can you just re-describe size and whether or not you heard anything? It was, how big, wise?
The two square objects were at least as large as a football field. The second encounter, they think it was much larger than a football field. We're talking like flying buildings. The object I saw was about 30 feet in diameter.
And to confirm, you were not the only person that saw this.
Correct.
I think I was also told that there was also reports of this in a police blotter in the area. Can you confirm that?
Yes, that's the documentation that I maintained from the original event and turned into Arrow and the FBI.
Okay. Do you have any more?
This hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs will come to order. I want to welcome everyone to today's hearing. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Plato once said, "The direction in which education starts, a man will determine his future in life." This truth echoes across the millennia for our youth today. Education is the foundation of a flourishing society and individual. And yet, in America today, our education foundation has seen cracks and is crumbling, has been crumbling for years. That jeopardizes American prosperity. For 25 years, reading and math proficiency is flatlined. Our children are not flourishing. They are falling behind. Meanwhile, the bureaucratic behemoth of traditional, and I say stress, traditional K through 12 education has only grown larger, measuring its success only by the outcomes of one metric, college admissions. For many decades, college has been thought of as the key to success in America. College degrees guaranteed high-paying, comfortable jobs. But the promise of college as a guaranteed path to prosperity is now waning. Half of the graduate class of 2023 now works in jobs that don't even require a degree. Entry-level white-collar positions are disappearing as our economy changes and the use of artificial intelligence rises. The U.S. faces an unprecedented surplus of college graduates, many buried in debt for decades, many holding degrees of little value to the marketplace. At the same time, our economy is starved for what higher education refuses to supply, which is manufacturing technicians, skilled tradesmen, engineers, and tradeswomen, and workers who can build to maintain the backbone of this great nation. It's time that we reevaluate our education system. Fortunately, President Trump and congressional Republicans have made considerable efforts to challenge the traditional model. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was signed into law earlier this year incentivizes funding of scholarships and offers an opportunity for parents to send their children to the best schools. School choice is not a theory, it's freedom, and it's competition, and it is accountability. It is vital to our economy, and it should be as American as apple pie and baseball. And alternative choices are not just needed at the K through 12 level, they are also needed at the post-secondary level. Recent reporting from the Department of Labor highlights that in the trades, the average salary after completion of an apprenticeship is $11,000 more than that of recent college graduates. Career in trades, as well as we will hear today from our witnesses, are vital. They offer high-paying jobs and provide ample opportunities across our education and training programs. And they are vital to prepare young people to take advantage of these opportunities. They pass on critical learning that upholds and strengthens businesses and local economies. America needs more post-secondary educational alternatives to prepare young people for these rewarding careers. Alternatives that offer clear-cut and viable opportunities compared to underperforming four-year college programs. America's youth and families deserve, and America's economy demands, educational and career training choices that better fit students, families, and the needs of our communities. And with that, I yield to Ranking Member Frost for his opening statement. Here's myself for 5 minutes of questions. Ms. Gretzler, the research that was quoted earlier suggests that 1 out of every 2 college graduates in the United States is employed in a job that does not require a degree. With that, is it fair to say that the post-education, post-secondary education system is not meeting students' needs?
I think in many instances it is not, and that's due to this massive amount of subsidies that are pushing too many people into college four-year degrees and also graduate degrees, but also a lack of awareness about what is the outcome of those degrees. And that's why I think it's been a good thing that Congress has instituted those restrictions so that funding are not going to go to programs that don't produce an outcome of earnings that are higher than a high school graduate. And that's exactly what we need more of, is more of these market-based solutions, but we're lacking that with the enormous amount of federal money that is in higher education.
When I hear the testimony of Dr. Hershey about what's happening in Reed Springs, it seems promising that they're figuring out how to meet the needs of the community. Is that rare? Is that happening across the country, or is this rare?
It's fortunate that we're seeing more of it happening, but this is a recent uptake, and I think that hopefully we will continue to see more and more of that. But that's really where students are getting the education while being paid that is leading to the same or higher level earnings as they would get from a college degree, and yet they're coming out without mountains of debt. And so hopefully we will continue to see more of that.
Thank you. Mr. Dillender, when it comes to your industry, I really was intrigued by learning about your TAP program, the Technician Apprenticeship Program. So my question is, without a program like that, many young people feel compelled to take out loans and pursue a four-year degree during a crucially formative time in their life. Could you speak to the transformative effect that the TAP program has on helping people achieve their milestones for apprenticeships?
So I think what I've witnessed and what I've seen at many of the graduations, if you're thinking specifically about the apprentice and kind of the opportunities as they graduate, that kind of promotes a number of stories of obviously the first homes, first cars, those things being purchased, and really having an opportunity to support their families very, very differently. So that's one of the key things that we see as a result of this, just as you look at the families and you spend time with them and understand the impact, that you've made with them.
Thank you. Dr. Hershey, how has the Table Rock Career Center's newer programs helped students to flourish?
It's been significant. Getting our kids to begin at a young age to understand their workforce, what those options are. We're really shifting the narrative in Southwest Missouri around workforce, entering the workforce rather than just focusing on a college career path. And so we're seeing kids that are making really having really strong experiences at a young age where
Are you seeing that they're excited to come to school or go into
you can
these
take
programs?
a kid that maybe is in a classroom prior to having this workforce connection, and they're just not seeing relevance to the work that they're doing. And then as soon as they get into an internship or they're at our career center in one of these trades, the light just ignites. And so we see a drastic shift in engagement. And that's why these kids, once they leave our career center, they're going off and entering into the field because they found a passion.
And would you say, so you kind of integrate with the business needs of the community. Would it be fair to say that you both enhance the outcomes for the students, but also are providing value to the local community?
Absolutely. Our local Chamber of Commerce is a significant partner for us. And so we are creating a workforce path for our own local community. Many of our students are going off to pursue other career paths, but then coming back into our local economy. So it's really starting to gain a lot of momentum, the work that we're doing with
What kind of feedback do you generally get from the employers about these
It's
students?
absolutely amazing. We're actually adding more and more employers because the word of mouth spreads within our community. And so we actually have so many employers that are wanting interns that we're trying to just find placement for them. And so they're kind of biting at the bit,
Wow.
just waiting to get a student placed in their employer, in their business.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I yield back the remainder of my time. I now recognize Ms. Ansari for her 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you. Mr. Burlison, would you like to be recognized for 5 minutes?
Sure, thank
you.
Okay. Ms. Fabrizio, at one point I think in your testimony, you talked about that without federal privacy law, businesses and consumers are navigating a confusing state-by-state patchwork. And I couldn't agree more, but can you elaborate on what, by us not having some kind of standardized laws in place and really kind of open the door for one state to squelch this industry?
Well, yes, and more so, it's very harmful to businesses, especially small businesses or startups with a unique idea to try to figure out how to scale. It's very stifling to try to comply with many different state laws and to grow your market and to grow your product. And so that it can be discouraging, and that can discourage innovation, and that's not what we want to do here. We want to encourage innovation, and a federal privacy framework would help that, give some consistency and some clear guardrails and rules of the road so that our innovators can innovate.
Right. Do you think we need, in general, just more broadly speaking, privacy laws related to our own personal data?
Well, in terms of looking at a framework for privacy or for AI, it should be risk-based, and we should approach it that way. But I do think versus a patchwork approach that, again, companies just can't adhere to it. They can't, small companies can't afford big privacy law firms to support them. That gives the big companies a competitive advantage, boxes out small companies.
So with that being said, what would you like to see as a framework for setting wide sweeping federal law?
Yeah, so we would be looking for something that is tech neutral, that's preemptive, that it's one framework, and that it's risk-based, and that it identifies those core categories, and it also, removes liability for companies that are compliant. And that, I think, would really unlock and propel innovation, move us forward.
Interesting. I mean, you were speaking kind of esoterically or like a little bit philosophically there, but specific, can you think of specific rules or regulations that you would want to see implemented?
I would love to get back to you with specifics and have a further conversation about it.
I respect that. Thank you. Mr. Hammond, a lot of this debate is about what the values that we're going to teach this AI, which I find interesting that we can't even agree on what free speech means as humanity. How can we trust AI to determine, or how can we attribute or provide some kind of values to AI?
This is an unsolved problem as it stands. So, right now, chatbots will adopt whatever value you put in. If you tell it to talk like a pirate, it will talk like a pirate. The question is, when these systems become more autonomous and acting on their own, how do they not just follow our values, but follow them reliably? And I think that's an area still of needed for further research.
Yeah, thank you. Because I'm touching back on the question I asked Ms. Fabrizio, which is that I think that the vulnerability for each one of us is that we're entering into an era where an AI can devour as much information about you as possible and weaponize that against you. And so that is something I think is a concern. And the question is, how do we protect people's rights? For example, every day I get annoying phone calls for people that want to know if I want to sell my rental homes. Every day. I had never signed up for anything. Somehow they know which homes I have, and they just always want to call me. I can only imagine how bad that's going to get, how much worse it's going to get. So, which is why I think we should be considering, on a federal level, having a tighter grip or control on the data about individuals, particularly important data, whether it's the electronic medical record. We may need to do something like what we did with HIPAA, or extend that beyond just your medical privacy. Dr. Lee, you're nodding your head.
I'm not in my head. We are way overdue in the United States for a national privacy standard that would actually dictate what goes into the machines, what comes out of it, in terms of what we consent to, not consent to implicitly, as well as, the ability of third parties to get a hold of that. You get calls about your rental property, I'm offered $100,000 every day through some type of voice clone. So I think that alongside deep fakes, which actually only exploits the opportunities that you're talking about, we really do need federal privacy legislation to slow this down.
Thank you. I yield back.
All right, I'll now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes.